Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Can't Wait. Sounds terrible. We're so backed up with news. We should be sponsored by Dulcolax, but we're not. That's Eleni. That's Patrick. That's Natalie. That's Rachel. I'm Dennis. Producer Grace is doing the producing thing. And it's award season, folks, for news nerds. The Chicago Tribune has won a Pulitzer Prize awarded to a team of reporters that includes friend of the pod and Sadie, the dog's person, Greg Pratt. They also won a Pointer Award, which is maybe a little bit like the Golden Globes to the Oscars, all for their reporting of Operation Midway Blitz. So, Natalie, I'm wondering if the Tribune has to share the award with POTUS 47.
I don't think he'd want it, but yeah, it's pretty remarkable. They were going through the history of the Trib's Pulitzer track record, and to be part of that newsroom right now must be really incredible. So, congrats to Greg and the whole team.
Eleni, it's a nice shot in the arm for our beleaguered journalists. And, several other Pulitzer winners also won prizes for their treatment and commentary and reporting of President Trump. So as much as they are at odds, they just can't seem to quit each other.
Yeah, I think it's a love-hate, but ultimately love-love relationship for all of them because bad things turn into good things at some point. And I think, yeah, great congrats to the entire team that won that because those were some very concerning times in Illinois. And I think having that real-time reporting and thorough reporting, particularly putting themselves in harm's way to get us the news,
Yep.
can't really be replicated. So we appreciate everything that they've done for us.
No, they did an excellent job, as so many of our Chicago journalists did during those days of rage. And this is a nice win. Our news colleagues have been having a hard time, but not everyone is winning. Patrick, we're losing a brand with an amazing 100-year legacy. Edward R. Murrow used to report for CBS Radio. Walter Cronkite did some turns at CBS Radio. Dan Rather did the World News Roundup for PM edition for many years. And CBS News is getting rid of CBS Radio. So they're blaming some of that on podcasts. I think our dozens of followers are detracting from the CBS radio network. But locally here in Chicago, do not fear. The News Watch Never Stops. All News Radio 780, 105.9 was spun off by CBS several years ago. Odyssey owns them. So they continue to report the news around the clock. And their brand manager and news director, Craig Schwab, says that they will make the best decision for Chicago and for their station in terms of what they do at the top of the hour. So it's the end of an era and one that a lot of us are nostalgic about, especially old white guys like you and me.
Well, I think we should all try and pool our resources to buy the jingle, right? If CBS News is shuttering the asset, perhaps Chicago do-gooders could buy that because the minute we played that, it's kind of iconic to think of that in your car. And if you ever had to commute from 30 miles away, but it could take up to 3 hours each way, you spend a lot of time listening to WBBM and getting the news. So
I just
the
took
good
it.
part,
I didn't have to pay for it. I got a great deal.
exactly. Oh, wow. Tuning on
News
the
Watch.
Kennedy Expressway today means you will be listening to this news for the next 6 hours. But the part I found most thrilling out of that was that they did seem to have some leads on some other national syndicates that could step in. So it'll be an odd transition. But certainly testament to their market share too, that they're number 2 in radio in the
Yeah.
Chicago market because people turn to them for quick updates on the news that matters
So,
most.
so Barry Weiss, the former editor of the conservative news outlet, The Free Press, uh, is kind of wearing the jacket on this, to use a Chicago phrase. She was made the president of the news division of CBS by Skydance Media and their leader David Ellison, who was looking to get some major mergers through the Trump administration. And you also heard of Ms. Wise's name earlier this year when she pulled a 60-minute story that was critical of the president's deportation policy for about a month because she was waiting for a response from the administration. And when she spoke to her new staff in January, the New York Times pointed out that she invoked Walter Cronkite's name as a symbol of old thinking, and said that if the network continues with its current strategy, quote, we're toast. And then they brought on 18 new contributors who are no doubt good influencers. So anyway, things are changing at CBS News. As the Times put it, they're crackling to a close. Also, not trending terribly well, Rachel, Mayor Brandon Johnson, who's in Springfield this week. We talked about horseshoes last week. Maybe he's going to have one. He might have better luck with that than he will be with his agenda in Springfield at this late date. But the Tribune has started doing polling again. They teamed up with Suffolk University, which I don't think their basketball team made the March Madness, but they're doing polls of 500 adult residents last month in Chicago, and 44% viewed the mayor unfavorably, while 34% viewed him favorably. And the Tribune says that spells an uphill road to re-election, but I thought it would be a lot lower.
It feels lower. It definitely feels lower for all of us watching him and watching him go back to Springfield yet again, like at the very end of session when he spent no time investing in those relationships and trying to lay out an agenda for what he needs out of Springfield it's a choice, right? But I think at this point, the best thing he can hope for is that just a bunch of people get into this race and you have a clown car, right? Because the clown car is when weird things happen. The clown car is how he ended up in the position he's in now. And so I think he's got to be out there recruiting a bunch of random weirdos to run for mayor and hoping that that helps his chances.
That appears to be the easiest thing going for him right now. It's almost like he planned it. In fact, the clown car has now been turned in, and they got one of those church vans for all of the candidates. A lot of them pasty white Irish guys, and I know my people. So there are so many candidates, and we will see how the mayor does if he ultimately gets to a head-to-head. The Tribune did pull some of the other big names. So we've talked about how Illinois Secretary of State Alexei Giannoulis, did I say that right, Eleni?
No.
Giannoulis? I'm not too practiced. Giannoulis. Alexei Giannoulis is seeking re-election in November, but he's really running for mayor. And he has $18 million in running that he has raised. He was viewed favorably by 42% of respondents. His unfavorables are much lower, only 7%. But 36% never heard of him. Eleni, are they not getting driver's licenses? Like what? Like just out there
Well,
on
if they
Uber?
are,
What?
they're not going to have a positive view because no matter who the Secretary of State is, when you're at the DMV, you're just raging mad at everything that's happening, and you look at the person's name on the wall and you're mad at them. So I'm going to go with that's not affecting him. I think, ultimately, we probably saw something very similar that happened the last election cycle for city mayor. And, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a repeat of our current mayor getting tossed out in a runoff and having two new candidates forward. The question is, who are they going to be? And all I can say to the Alexei team is I hope they paid close attention to the Senate race and how money was spent there and when it was spent. So money, the number ultimately doesn't dictate who wins and loses. So it'll be interesting to see.
You mean Juliana's Senate race or the one where he lost?
Well, I'm always willing to talk about that one, but I was talking about the Juliana and Raja Krishnamurthy race.
I figured. Just
Who
check.
was that guy that beat Alexei Janulius? I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
Anyway, tell you who is trending well, but this is a nice segue, Eleni, when you talk about the Senate campaign, because there was a sort of positive, big slappy wet kiss coverage in national Politico, featured in local Politico, about political pundit Jonathan Martin's sit down with Governor J.B. Pritzker at Manny's Deli. So Manny's Deli, always trending very well, and despite rising gas prices, continues to sell pastrami's. It's delicious. And by the way, the governor, who has been on quite a fitness kick, according to Politico, nibbled on a matzo ball soup. I don't know if you nibble on soup, but they do put a big matzo ball in there. Anyway, I'm nitpicking. They had a talk about whether he's going to run for president. He, of course, played coy. But one of the questions that came up, and this leads me, this rambling lack of a point leads me to Eleni's point. There was a discussion about whether the governor is the new Chicago boss. And Politico, I'm quoting from Politico here, the governor seemed to bristle. No, here's the thing. What I am comfortable with is building a party that actually makes a difference, like having the infrastructure for candidates. And then he goes on to say, remember, you run in a primary. You put your all into it. You raise money and you spend all of it. And then you win a primary and you're broke. That's usually how primaries end, Pritzker said. That's where the party needs to pick up. So I'm very comfortable building a party that will pick up Democrat candidates for a general election. So is he implying that he does not weigh in on primary races?
All I took from that was that he is saying he will help contribute to these candidates after they go through rough primaries to ensure that, they're not feeble and weak when they're out of a primary and into a general.
I think the point he made about they fundraise and they spend all their money is funny because it's easy to be a boss when you're a billionaire and you can just backfill the accounts, right?
He's read about these things. And he's never experienced that himself.
Too much of it.
Right. Yeah. You look back to that Senate race. How did that happen? Billions and billions. It was less about fundraising and more about having someone who was willing to dump huge amounts of cash in one person. And that certainly changes the dynamics of being a boss, I guess.
Patrick, Eleni has made this point before about the timing of the money. And that was probably one of the more interesting developments of what came down to Stratton versus Raja was the timing. And it's sort of like, when you pull that trigger, it's a little bit more art than science, unless his billions of dollars has bought him some special political algorithms.
Yeah, I mean, money is super important, right? But we're not living under Mayor Michael Bloomberg's presidency. Mayor Giuliani fizzled out and very early on as well, and they all had funding. I think the message matters, and to Eleni's point, to Rachel's point, to the ones we've made before, knowing that there's a source of funds, that taking that uncertainty out allows campaigns to plan for and prioritize what they're doing and when they're doing it. I think we saw Lieutenant Governor Stratton, artfully picking off the hot button issues to align herself with the party base on. And then lo and behold, those are what are being communicated in the closing weeks to the voters in that primary. So to the extent we can extrapolate from that and figure out what's going to happen in the fall or in the mayoral race, right, there are some folks with, to Rachel's point, compounding interest that makes their involvement in a election at a very large magnitude very immaterial to them, and we'll see how it unfolds.
Well, Natalie, we shall see, right? Whether the boss
Never
decides
boring.
to be a boss. All right, well, you know what else is never boring? Sounds terrible. Producer Grace is giving us that sounder. Okay, so who wants to tell us what sounds terrible in the days ahead? Rachel, I nominate you. You look eager.
Sure. I look eager. Interesting. So my sounds terrible this week. I actually thought of a couple days ago for once. And that is I was doing something we all do, I think, on a weekly basis. I was filling up my gas tank. And I was shocked to look at the pump and see that in my neighborhood, gas is up to $4.99 a gallon, which is just like horrifying, right? And I was kind of taken back to the last time it was this bad, which was in 2022. I was working in the legislature at the time, and I remember some of the conversations we were having then, right? And I mean, first and foremost, gas prices are determined largely by global markets, right? So there's only so much that is even like remotely in the control of the state. But I remember the conversations we were having, and I think there are probably some similar ones happening right now, right? Like the state can either work on motor fuel tax or like gas tax, which is what most people call it, or they can work on the sales tax, you know? And so we've seen everything in the past proposed, from capping motor fuel tax to capping the sales tax on gas to temporary sales tax holidays. You know, the last time we saw any actual substantial action would have been back in 22 when the budget included a 6-month freeze that very conveniently ended not long after Election Day. You can all draw whatever conclusions you want from that. But once that freeze ended, you know, the gas tax went up and has gone up every year since. So, I mean, the sad reality is like it's difficult to do anything on any of those fronts because that money goes to roads and bridges, right? And then we have a new pressure in the last year. Not that many months ago, they passed like a $1.5 billion transit plan that actually moved some of the revenue that would have previously been going to roads and bridges to transit, right? So now it's even harder to try and do anything at the state level for that like 15% of the price that we could even remotely begin to try and impact. And again, the real pressures are national, they're international, right? So that all paints a pretty terrible picture at the pump going forward.
It was a long gas tank to fill.
Right. I
She's
drive
got
a
a lot
small
of time
SUV.
at the pump.
You had that whole train of pumping gas.
Small SUV,
That
so
is
I had a lot of time to think about it.
And it's really terrible. So I can see
It's
why
really terrible.
you came up with it a couple days early.
It's the
Yeah.
ultimate sounds terrible. And by the way, next time you go to the gas station, if you go to one of the stations closer to the expressway, some of them have a 6 handle on them. So it's getting worse. It sounds terrible, but it's getting worse. Patrick, what's terrible in your world?
Well, I didn't want this August group to miss International Composting Awareness Week. We are in the midst of it. And I know each of us are thinking about that. And I can think of no better analogy than what Rachel just came up with, which is to recycle some of these beautiful ideas and turn them into the black gold that will let all the plants rise to their highest potential and unlock our state's prosperity. So happy International Composting Awareness Week. Everyone, we need to be more aware of the benefits of composting.
Still have time to run out to the Hallmark store and get you a card.
The Loose household compost. I just want to put that out there.
See,
I'm in.
Only 1 out
I
of
didn't
5 of
need a
us. We got to
reminder.
get it to majority composting situation here.
Natalie is Oak Park adjacent, so I think it might even be the law out there. Natalie, what's terrible?
There's a tax on it to compost.
Might as well.
We're in end of school season at our house, and all these vendors and the schools are looking for ways to nickel and dime. Speaking of taxes and excessive payments, I was just shook down for a graduation sign that could ring you up to $85 for a vinyl 3x5 poster of your child that includes a baby picture and a current picture. My child is in fourth grade, I want to mind you. This is not like he's a senior in high school heading off to Harvard or MIT. He's just going to the middle school down the street. I missed the deadline for the graduation sign. Turns out Charlie, who doesn't take much, like pretty whatever, wants one. So I had to call the vendor and apologize for missing the deadline. And I went with a cheaper option. I'm not hanging a 3x5 vinyl poster of my child on the front of our house. I went with a yard sign, but it still cost me a nice $40 for a yard sign. So Willard Wildcats, use that money wisely.
Producer Grace has some design capabilities if you ever get in a jam like that again. When Ethan needs a
Maybe
sign.
I should have asked ChatGPT to make me the sign. Might have been cheaper.
Reuse all those political yard signs you got in your garage. Just,
Right.
you got
Get a
a free
Sharpie.
base.
Right.
Charlie, and then my, all lives matter.
Eleni, what's more terrible than all of these terrible things?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go with my mood. It's like rock bottom. It's pretty bad. Like I don't know if you could tell from my face this entire podcast, but it's bad. It's
I'm
so
glad
terrible.
that was I'm glad that was your sounds terrible, because my sounds terrible is being Greek. I think it sounds terrible.
Whoa.
Just getting to know you over the last several years has led me to that belief. But then I decided to get a better fix on the Queen of Terribleness. So I recently, and there's been some ads for a summer blockbuster by Christopher Nolan, The Odyssey, written by a guy named Homer. So I just read The War That Killed Achilles, and the book's been out for a little bit. And so you read what goes on with these folks. Now, it was a 10-year war, and it's very much, you realize once you can get through keeping all the Greek names straight, they're a lot more difficult than Giannulius. It's an anti-war poem in many ways. So when the Iliad opens up, Achilles, who had been fighting a war for 10 years at this point, and he thought his commander was a boob. So the poem opens with him telling his commander, "You wine sack with a dog's eyes and a deer's heart." And then later on, his best friend, wink, wink, Patroclus, dies. And then later on, Priam lashes out after one of his 50 kids was killed. And he tells the surviving kids, "I wish all of you had been killed besides the running ships in the place of Hector." And then his wife lashes out at Achilles and said, "I wish I could set my teeth in the middle of his liver and eat it." So it's really hard to be Greek. It sounds terrible. I'm not going to say it looks terrible, but it definitely sounds terrible. And Eleni, respect for just
Your
persevering.
house is going to burn down pretty soon.
You never know.
What you-
I have a juicer.
I just feel
I've
like
got the address if you need it, Eleni.
Greek school is from 9 to 12 in Niles. So if you want to pop over there for, take some of these tests for the kids, that might, more than I do based on what you just said. So you may be.
I
you may
still
be the
think I would
Greekest
need
one
to.
there.
I might need to go there in the smaller bus. Anyway, that's terrible. This whole thing has been terrible. And if you're looking for terrible, you've come to the right place. That's Eleni. That's Natalie. That's Patrick, Rachel, producer Grace. I'm Dennis. We appreciate you dialing in. We'll see you next time.